Another day dawns in the courtroom charged with routine. Yet another case, another accused, another judge poised to pen the verdict before a single plea echoes. But this isn't some ordinary man facing trial. No, etched in his weathered face is more than time's mark. It's a truth potent enough to fracture the system's iron grip. What erupts next isn't merely a legal skirmish. It's a seismic clash of hubris against endurance, arrogance against legacy. When the dust settles, someone will emerge transformed, but it won't be him. Brace yourself for the moment power collides with its equal. You won't want to miss it. So, before we plunge into the fray, shout out in the comments, what time's ticking where you're watching, and from which corner of the globe? We thrive on knowing where our tribe tunes in. If stories like this ignite your soul, smash that like button and subscribe. Because trust me, they're worth it.
Old courthouses harbor a peculiar hush, not serene, but oppressive, heavy with the ghosts of unmet justice and shattered vows. Montgomery County Courthouse was no exception. As dawn's first rays pierced its towering windows, the wooden benches groaned beneath those hungering for fairness, or its shadow. Then he entered. William Thompson, 78, stepped forward, each movement steeped in purpose. His stooped frame didn't whisper frailty, but roared of battles waged, burdens shouldered in stoic silence. Clad in a worn brown flannel, buttoned to the collar, his faded slacks bore the soft creases of time. His cracked leather boots, though weathered, stood defiant, mirroring their owner. He doffed his hat at the threshold, a nod to courtesy, but respect in return. He'd walked into the wrong arena. Whispers hissed through the crowd instantly. Another drifter, likely destitute. Why clog the court's docket? No one bothered to hush their scorn. William had heard it all before, on city streets, from guards in unfamiliar neighborhoods, from officers who cuffed first, questioned later. Yet he didn't waver. Never had. Eyes fixed ahead, chin lifted, he'd long mastered the art of dignity's quiet roar. Presiding from the bench was Judge Richard Coleman, 59, a broad-shouldered titan in impeccable garb. His black robe wasn't mere attire, it was a fortress. The man within didn't dispense justice. He hurled verdicts with a voice like a guillotine and a glare that sliced deeper. Coleman had locked away more souls than the county's memory could hold, unapologetic about branding repeat offenders, or those people, as society's dregs. To him, William was guilty before the gavel fell. He hadn't yet chosen how brutal the punishment would be. "Next case," Coleman growled, eyes glued to the file before him. The bailiff's throat cleared. Case 771B, State versus William Thompson, charged with unlawful occupation of condemned property. William advanced, solitary at the defense table. No attorney, no ally, just a man pitted against a rigged machine. Coleman's gaze finally rose, twisted into a sneer. He didn't see a war hero or a retired architect who'd shaped city skylines. No, he saw what he craved. A broken old man, ripe for reprimand, easy to discard. Well, Coleman drawled, reclining smugly. Back again, are we? He leafed through the folder with theatrical slowness. A charade. He'd already scripted the outcome. Caught squatting in a doomed house on Riverside Drive, he sneered, dripping sarcasm. Let me guess, chasing old ghosts? Sentimental drivel? William stood mute. You lot always spin some tale, Coleman scoffed, brandishing the file. But memories don't grant deeds, Mr. Thompson. Still, William held his tongue. His silence unnerved some spectators. Others snickered. But he stood unshaken, shoulders relaxed, hands clasped, neither groveling nor apologizing, just waiting. I'll ask once more, Coleman snapped, irritation flaring. Were you on that property? William nodded deliberately. Yes, sir. And what were you doing there?" William paused, not from doubt, but to wield his words with precision. "I sat on the porch," he said plainly. No theatrics, no excuses, just raw truth. Coleman barked a laugh. "The porch of a house slated for the wrecking ball. You know the city owns that land now, don't you?" William's voice stayed level. He nodded again. "I know their claim, Your Honor, but that house was once mine." A subtle tremor rippled through the room, not from sound, but from the dawning unease when a man refuses to crumble under the system's weight. Coleman's sneer dimmed faintly. He leaned forward, elbows digging into the bench. "Was yours, but no longer. So why haunt land you've no right to?" William drew a soft breath, barely audible but potent. He met the judge's eyes. "Because sitting there, the world feels whole again." He spoke as if describing a sacred dawn, not defending a crime. For a fleeting second, something flickered in Coleman's face. Comprehension, perhaps. But it vanished. He leaned back, pen in hand. "Feelings don't make it legal, Mr. Thompson. The world doesn't bend for your whims." No reply, just William, unyielding, silent, proud. Coleman's jaw tightened, irked by the absence of surrender. He'd expected begging, tears, or defiance. But William had fought wars most in that room couldn't fathom. He owed no proof now. And Coleman was moments from learning exactly who William Thompson was. Not yet, though. Not until one call changed everything. The courtroom's chill wasn't from the air, but from its cold heart, its stifling hush, the way eyes dismissed William Thompson as a lost cause. He stood alone at the defense table, hands calmly folded. No lawyer, no kin, no murmur of support from the crowd. Just an old man in a chamber that had already condemned him. Judge Richard Coleman adjusted his robe, then leaned in with an authority that brooked no defiance. He didn't merely occupy the bench, he ruled it, as if justice bore his seal and righteousness his scowl. The assistant DA rose, young, polished, blonde hair pinned tightly. Her navy suit was sharp, her face a mask. She clutched a manila folder like it was just another cog in the daily grind. "Your Honor," she began, Case 771B, State of Georgia versus William Thompson, age 78, charged with unlawful entry and occupation of condemned property at 415 Riverside Drive. She flipped open the file, voice flat. Mr. Thompson was found on the property's front porch. Officers reported he refused to leave when ordered. No violence occurred, but this isn't his first offense. He was cited earlier this year for a similar act on a city redevelopment lot. She set the folder down with a soft thump and eyed the judge. Given his repeat behavior, the state seeks a firm resolution. Coleman didn't glance her way. His stare bored into William. "Hear that," he said, words deliberate. "You were warned once, yet here you stand again." William didn't quiver, didn't nod, didn't lower his gaze. He stood rooted, breathing, waiting. Coleman leaned closer. "Explain this to me, Mr. Thompson. I'm all ears. What drives a man your age to trespass on land he's got no claim to? Think you're above the law?" William held his gaze. His voice, when it came, was soft but unshakable. "I never thought the law didn't apply, Your Honor. I just couldn't let go of what I remember." "Forget what?" Coleman jeered. "A creaky porch? A rusty swing? That's your excuse?" William stayed silent. He owed no explanation. He'd said enough, but his quiet rattled the judge, who craved shouts, sobs, or submission, not this unyielding calm. "Here's the deal," Coleman pressed, voice hardening. "This court doesn't trade in nostalgia or sob stories. It runs on order, law, property rights. And you? You've got no stake here." He flicked the file. "No title, no lease, no legal ground to stand on." William gave a slight nod. "That's true." Coleman's head tilted. Then why go back? The reply came like a whisper. Because it was mine before they declared it wasn't. A brief pause hung, just long enough for spectators to shift, sensing something weightier than a trial unfolding. Something raw, human. But Coleman remained unmoved. He slammed the file shut, voice rising. Know what I think, Mr. Thompson? You waltz in here chasing pity, angling for another chance. But you're no victim. You chose this path. You could have obeyed, stayed clear, but no. You're back. William stood steady, unshaken, not from apathy, but from surviving worse. And he knew what loomed next. Coleman's lips curled, not with warmth, but disdain. I see your kind daily, he said. Convinced the world owes you, thinking if you linger long enough, we'll buy your story. He reclined. But the law doesn't care for tales. It demands facts. And fact is, you broke it. William drew a quiet breath. I broke nothing, he murmured. I just sat there. No protest, no strategy, just a truth that lingered. But Coleman brushed it aside. What, sat to reminisce? To feel something? To make a stand? Whatever lie you feed yourself. He shook his head. You're 78, Mr. Thompson. Time to stop dreaming and start owning your burden. The gallery gasped softly. A voice muttered, enough, barely audible. But William, his eyes never left the bench, unblinking, because he had nothing to prove here. Know what you're really after. Coleman's tone sharpened. You want our sympathy, want us to think there's honor in defying the law. But there's no glory in breaking into a condemned shack, just pathos. William lifted his gaze. I didn't break in. Coleman smirked. Oh, right. You just sauntered in like it was still yours. William nodded. Exactly what I did. Coleman rolled his eyes. Got a lawyer? William shook his head. No, sir. Tried to get one? No money. Naturally, Coleman muttered. The prosecutor cleared her throat. Your Honor, she ventured, given Mr. Thompson's age and the Nonviolent Act, the state suggests a fine or community service. Coleman wheeled on her, as if she'd proposed freeing a killer. That's justice to you. It aligns with the code, she replied cautiously. No threat. No harm. Coleman's fingers drummed the desk. Tap, tap, tap. He glared at William. That's the issue. Everyone wants to coddle you because you're old, soft-spoken, harmless-looking. His eyes narrowed. But your kind doesn't learn from light taps. Then, without hesitation, without mercy, he declared, I'm sentencing you to 30 days in county jail. The verdict crashed like lightning. A gasp erupted. The prosecutor's eyes widened. The bailiff flinched. But William stood unmoved, unblinking, unshaken, because he'd seen this storm brewing. And he knew something else. The fight wasn't over, and neither was he. Silence isn't surrender. William Thompson stood at the defense table. No counsel, no family, no papers to brandish, no pleas to voice, just a quiet force. A man reduced to a case number by a judge's wrath. Judge Richard Coleman glowered, at peace with his ruling. He wasn't seeking truth. He was staging a spectacle, not for William alone, but for all who watched. This courtroom was his theater, and William merely another scene in his oft-rehearsed drama. You're awfully quiet, Mr. Thompson, Coleman taunted, leaning back. Nothing to defend yourself with? William's voice emerged, low, unwavering. What could I say that you'd hear? The gallery stirred. No anger, no sarcasm, no defiance, just a stark, shattering truth. Coleman's lips twisted into a smirk. So, you're playing the silent saint, huh? William blinked slowly. No, sir. I'm just weary of talking to deaf ears. Coleman's laugh was cold, smug, a man certain he held the reins. Everyone's a poet when cornered, he mocked. But I trade in facts, not feelings. William stayed mute. His silence wasn't hollow. It brimmed with decades of slights, doors slammed, sacrifices buried, and countless commands to know his place. He wasn't quiet from indifference, but from having nothing left to prove. The prosecutor sat rigid, sensing the case's wrongness, but bound by protocol over instinct. Coleman adjusted his robe and leaned in. "Here's the real problem," he declared to the room. "Folks like Mr. Thompson think rules don't apply to them, that if they stay calm, we'll overlook their crimes." He jabbed a finger, preaching. "This man broke the law, plain and simple. I don't care about his porch or his memories. That house is city property. Condemned. Forbidden. End of discussion." William stood rooted, eyes forward, chin high. No nod, no shake, no flicker of breaking, because he wasn't broken. He was calculating, watching. Coleman squinted. "Ever wonder why no one owns their mistakes anymore?" he pressed. "It's always someone else's fault, some tear-jerking backstory to sway us." William tilted his head, not defiant but curious. "Ever wonder," he countered, "why some hear only feelings when history's speaking?" The words hit like a boulder in calm waters. Coleman's jaw clenched, betraying a nerve struck. "Your history's not on trial, Mr. Thompson," he snapped, voice tight. "No," William murmured. "It never is." It wasn't about property or trespassing. Everyone felt it. Deep down, they knew William wasn't tried for a crime, but for daring to stand tall in a world bent on humbling him. Yet he didn't crack. Coleman leaned closer. "You're no stranger to this," he said icily. "Think we don't check? 6 months back, you were cited for the same stunt. Private land, no permission, and here you are again. Always where you don't belong." A pause, heavy with implication. William lifted his eyes. "My whole life, I've been told I don't belong," he said clearly. "In schools, neighborhoods, offices I built, and now here." Coleman shook his head unmoved. "The world's cruelty doesn't earn you a free pass. That's not how this works." William nodded slowly. "I know how it works," he said. "That's why I'm not shocked." The room shifted, palpable. Early scoffers fell silent. Whisperers hushed. Even the bailiff glanced at William with a glint of respect. Coleman cleared his throat, battling the unease creeping beneath his skin. "Tired of playing victim, Mr. Thompson?" The jab landed hard. William didn't flinch, his silence louder than any retort. Spectators exchanged glances. The prosecutor shifted uneasily. Coleman sighed, vexed by his failed provocation. "Let the record show," he barked. "The defendant offers no defense, no motion, no counsel request." He glared at William. "You won't even try." William met his stare, calm, steady, present. "I tried," he said. "My whole life. This isn't my first courtroom, nor the first to miss the mark." The words cut deeper than any outburst could. Coleman's mouth opened, but his voice snagged, just enough to hint at doubt. William stood firm. He'd entered ready to be judged, but unbeknownst to the judge, prosecutor, or crowd, judgment cut both ways. William Thompson had been weighing this system his entire life, and now, at last, he could voice it. The air crackled with change. No one moved, no one dared breathe loudly. It was the stillness of a fuse nearing its spark. All felt it, though few could name it. William Thompson, 78, stood alone at the defense table, unmoved, voiceless, unbroken. His calm, his poise, his resilience outshouted any revolt. But Judge Richard Coleman craved submission, apology, defeat, none of which William offered. That made this moment perilous. The prosecutor cleared her throat and rose, sensing the room's weight. "Your Honor," she ventured cautiously, "we've reviewed Mr. Thompson's case. Considering his age, clean record, and nonviolent act. We propose community service, or a fine, perhaps brief probation. No. The words sliced the air like a blade. Coleman didn't shout. His tone's edge sufficed. Sharp, final, deliberate. The prosecutor faltered. Your Honor, I said no. Coleman cut in, hand raised. Let's be clear. Men like Mr. Thompson don't change from sweeping streets or paying pennies. Men like him. He spoke without shame, laden with bias and verdict. William didn't blink. He'd heard worse in kinder places. Coleman leaned forward, eyes locked on William like a hunter, eyeing prey that wouldn't flee. I've seen your type, he growled. You glide in with soft words and steady stares, thinking you're untouchable, that standing tall makes us forget your crime. William didn't answer, didn't lower his gaze, knowing this wasn't about justice or trespassing, but a robed man desperate to prove his dominion, to force even dignity to bow. Your years don't sway me, Mr. Thompson, Coleman pressed. You stepped on that land, knowing it was forbidden. You ignored warnings, defied the law, and expect leniency for it. William's silence held firm, but the room grew restless. Whispers, shifts, spectators who'd mocked now uneasy, sensing not a trial but a reckoning unfolding. The prosecutor tried again, more tentatively. Your Honor, precedent in similar cases supports alternative sentencing, especially. I know precedent, Coleman snapped, voice rising. This isn't about precedent, but ensuring consequences for lawbreakers. His eyes gleamed as they fixed on William. 30 days. The words struck like a gunshot. Excuse me, the prosecutor gasped. 30 days in county jail, Coleman repeated, louder. Effective immediately, for the record. The room seemed to collapse inward. The clerk's fingers froze above her keyboard. The bailiff shifted awkwardly. Gasps broke out. A voice whispered, Jail! A reporter scribbled furiously. And William stood serene, as if he'd foreseen this verdict from the start. Coleman reclined, arms crossed, briefly smug, like he'd won a private war. But unease gnawed at him. He'd expected resistance, pleas, shock, tears. William's single nod, as if awaiting this all along, unsettled him deeply. Do you understand your sentence, Mr. Thompson? He asked, irked by the calm. Yes, Your Honor, William replied simply. I understand. Anything to say before I close this? William met his eyes. No, sir. Coleman hesitated, just a breath. Court adjourned. The gavel crashed, its echo final, cold, heavy. But William's composure gnawed at the room's core, not at Coleman, not at anyone. The prosecutor bowed her head. The bailiff approached, yet William stood like a statue, quiet, dignified, unbroken. 30 days couldn't shatter him. He'd endured worse than cells and steel. He'd faced men who erased him, systems that buried his name. Yet here he stood. Coleman, from the bench, fidgeted with his robe, a faint unease stirring. Was it the silence, the lack of triumph, or the sense that his authority hadn't truly prevailed? He reached for the next file, but a whisper warned him. This wasn't done. William had been too quiet, and the calmest soul often harbors the fiercest storm, yet to break. The gavel's echo lingered like a distant storm. Coleman shuffled papers, ready for the next case, as if the last hadn't just cracked the room's foundation. Whispers rekindled, disbelief threading through the gallery. No one foresaw this end. Jail for a 78-year-old who'd only sat on a porch, clinging to his past. William hadn't stirred. He stood tall, spine rigid, hands clasped, the verdict sliding off him like rain on stone, unable to pierce the armor forged by decades of survival. No panic, no desperation, just an eerie, deliberate calm. The bailiff paused, not from confusion, but reluctance to shatter such tranquility. It wasn't defeat. It was strategy, as if William orchestrated a greater unveiling. Coleman glanced up, annoyed by the hush. "This is over," he barked, seeking finality. "Take him into custody." Then William's voice cut through. "Before I go," he said, calm, respectful, "may I make a call?" Not a plea, not a desperate grasp, but a man ticking off a final task. Coleman blinked. "A call?" He chuckled dryly, mocking. "What, calling a lawyer now? Too late for that, don't you think?" William didn't bite. "One call, sir." Coleman rolled his eyes. "Fine, 60 seconds. Bailiff, give him your phone." The bailiff hesitated, then handed over his cell. William nodded thanks, ignoring the eyes on him. He dialed a number from memory, steady as if reciting a prayer. The room fell deathly still, whispers fading. Something in William's poise, his wait for the call to connect, gripped them all. Ring. Ring. Click. In a voice like granite, he spoke 4 words. "It's time. Bring them." No more, no less, no hint of who or what "them" was. Just 4 words, delivered with a calm heavier than any roar. He returned the phone, nodded, and faced forward. Tall. Waiting. Not defiance, but certainty's patience. Coleman watched, his sneer faltering into unease, suspicion, perhaps fear, though he buried it fast. "What? Your grandkid staging a sit-in?" he quipped, smile forced. William didn't respond. He didn't need to. The call wasn't for show, not for the room. It was a beacon, and its answer was coming. Coleman cleared his throat, eager to move on. "Enough drama. Bailiff, take him." But a ripple swept the room, subtle, then swelling. A hush signaling something imminent. Even the distracted fell silent, sensing the story's unfinished arc. William's head turned slightly, catching Coleman's eyes. No rage, no fear, just knowing. For the first time, Coleman didn't hold the room's reins. Deep down, he sensed this wasn't the end. Not about a porch, an old man, or a charge. It was the dawn of something bigger. And though no one yet knew it, those 4 words would upend everything. It's time. Bring them. William didn't need the court to save him. He had the truth, and its herald was en route. It began with a sound. Not chains, not the gavel, but the sharp, purposeful click of heels striking marble beyond the courtroom doors. Click, click, click. Then, with a thunderous sweep, the double doors burst open. The room froze. Heads whipped around. Even Coleman, mid-reach for the next file, jolted, stunned by the intrusion's force. There she stood, tall, unyielding, radiating command. She didn't enter the courtroom. She claimed it. A sleek black suit carved her silhouette, its crisp lines screaming power and precision. Her heels struck like a war drum, halting time in a room where seconds had stalled. Her name, Elizabeth Harper, William's daughter. Not merely kin, but a state senator, a fierce attorney, a voice that shook capitals. Now, in Montgomery County Court, she ignored the gallery's gasps, the judge's stare, uninterested in pleasantries. She came for justice, and she wasn't alone. 3 men trailed her, suits tailored, briefcases gleaming with gold embossed Carter & Sons, LLP, the Northeast's most formidable law firm. Their presence quaked the room. Even seasoned attorneys straightened, eyes wide, sensing the tempest that had arrived. Coleman's jaw locked. He fought for control, adjusting his robe, clearing his throat. "This matter's closed," he boomed, louder than needed. "Unless you've got court business." Elizabeth didn't flinch, didn't pause, didn't blink. She strode to the defense table where her father stood. William didn't turn. He'd been waiting. Her hand touched his shoulder, a fleeting gesture, yet it roared of unity, of strength. She pivoted to face Coleman, expression unreadable, eyes like daggers. "Your Honor," she declared, voice clear, unshakable. "Before my father's taken, You need to see some documents." Coleman leaned back, visibly nettled. "This case is ruled," he said, straining for steadiness. "Want to appeal?" "File like the rest." Elizabeth reached into her briefcase, not arguing, not pleading. She drew a thick, bound, stamped folder and marched it to the bench, placing it with surgical precision, neither aggressive nor soft, but undeniable. "Read it," she said. Not a request, not a threat, just truth. The room held its breath. Coleman wavered, pride warring with curiosity. Then, with a flash of annoyance, he snatched the folder and opened it. His face shifted instantly. Brows knitted, eyes narrowed, fingers tightened on the pages. His posture sagged into the chair. The papers weren't just facts. They were a reckoning, reflecting the man he'd condemned. William Thompson wasn't some vagrant on doomed land. He was a military architect, a decorated veteran, holder of patents that reshaped cities, a consultant on federal disaster recovery. And that house he'd been arrested for haunting? Not city property, not truly condemned. It was mired in a zoning dispute, still partly his, inherited through his late wife's trust, never legally seized. The truth lay before Coleman in filings, deeds, notarized affidavits. His mouth parted, voiceless. He reread a paragraph thrice, willing the words to shift. They didn't. He'd jailed a man without cause, against his legal rights, a man whose daughter, a senator, now stared him down with the fury of precision-timed justice. The courtroom's silence wasn't apathy, it was awe, as power slid from the bench to the defense table. Reporters scrambled for phones. Clerks watched, breathless. Coleman, for the first time that day, looked scared. Not of William or Elizabeth, but of the truth he'd ignored and could no longer dodge. He glanced at William, who met him with calm, knowing eyes. No anger, no triumph, just acknowledgement. The man he'd tried to erase loomed larger than the court, backed by a daughter, not begging mercy, but dismantling error. And she was only beginning. Judge Richard Coleman clutched the folder like it might burn him. The courtroom's hush wasn't ordered. It was instinct, as no one dared breathe. This wasn't a dramatic twist or legal sleight of hand. It was truth. Raw, relentless, unfolding live. Elizabeth Harper hadn't come to grovel, barter, or politic. She brought evidence, and each line Coleman read drained his bravado like blood from a wound. He fought to mask it, but the room saw, jaw clenched, knuckles white, lips a grim line buckling under the weight of revelation. The silence stirred. Reporters texted furiously. A clerk bit her lip. The prosecutor, steady all morning, leaned forward, craving a glimpse of Coleman's unraveling. It was all there. William Thompson, branded a trespasser, a nuisance, was no such thing. He was a military architect whose design saved lives in disaster zones, honored with commendations. His record wasn't clean, it was exemplary. And the house he'd been accused of invading? His, legally. His, caught in unresolved zoning wars, never fully taken. The deed in Coleman's hands bore William's name. Coleman's eyes darted, not reading, but fleeing, as if haste could erase the truth. Too late. The man he'd shamed, sentenced, and belittled wasn't just innocent. He'd been wronged, publicly, legally, undeniably. Elizabeth stood by her father, poised, letting the documents roar louder than any voice. Coleman tried to speak. "Mr. Thompson," he croaked, throat clearing. "These documents, are they in the record?" "They will be," Elizabeth replied, ironclad. "Notarized, reviewed, certified copies filed by hour's end." Coleman nodded stiffly, eyes flicking between her. The folder. William. He ached to deflect, to find an out. But truth needed no excuse. It loomed, unyielding. For the first time, Coleman was a judge without a script. His voice faltered, uncertain. I wasn't informed of this during the case review. Elizabeth stepped forward, calm but lethal. With respect, Your Honor, she said. It wasn't your job to know my father's story. It was your duty to treat him as human, and you failed. Gasps ricocheted. A spectator whispered, "Wow." She pressed on. My father didn't seek favors or pity. He wanted to sit on the porch of the home he built, where he raised me, where my mother died. She paused, letting the words sear. And you, she said, you treated him like garbage, like a felon. William stood unmoved, his morning-long patience now radiant. He wasn't quiet from weakness, but from foresight. This moment was his design. One call had summoned justice, not vengeance, but truth. Coleman slumped, rattled, glasses off, rubbing his nose. His commanding tone was gone, replaced by unease. A clerk whispered to him. He nodded slowly. He faced William. "I apologize," he murmured. "Mr. Thompson, there's been a grave oversight." William's eyes met his, steady, no gloating. "Indeed there has," he said softly. Coleman swallowed. Elizabeth advanced. "Your Honor, I move to vacate my father's sentence and clear his record immediately." "Of course," Coleman stammered. "Motion granted. Effective now." To the bailiff. "Release Mr. Thompson at once." The bailiff stepped back, as if disarming. The room's energy surged, breaths released, reporters typing madly, headlines forming. "War hero wrongly jailed." "Senator's daughter upends court." "Injustice crushed live." Coleman seemed to shrink, nowhere to hide under the glaring truth. William inhaled deeply, then stepped forward, facing his condemner. "You didn't just question my story," he said. "You erased it. One glance, and you decided my worth. That's the wound." Silence gripped the room. "But truth, Your Honor," he added, "doesn't vanish when ignored. It bides its time." And William had bided his, now met by truth in full force, with reinforcements. Elizabeth stood beside him, not just a senator or lawyer, but a daughter who'd bridged the gap, not to brawl, but to end a wrong her father never should have faced. Together, they were no victims, but beacons, proving justice delayed can be justice reclaimed. With one call, 4 words. Coleman sat petrified, fingers locked on the folder, as if it could halt the tide. His years of certainty, built ruling by ruling, crumbled, and all saw it. He hadn't just erred, he dismissed a man's existence. Now that man stood vindicated, stronger than imagined. The folder wasn't just paper, it was a mirror, and Coleman loathed his reflection. The silence wasn't calm but crushing. Gallery, clerks, reporters, bailiff, all felt it. This wasn't a courtroom now. It was Judgment Day. The prosecutor stared at her desk, hands clasped tight. She'd followed rules, but knew this wasn't about law. It was about how William looked, not who he was. Coleman had judged him pre-speech, sentencing not on proof but prejudice, blind to the man's valor, home, fatherhood. Now all new. Coleman struggled to rally, adjusting his robe, hand over mouth, scraping for dignity. But his slouch betrayed him. He wasn't the room's master today. "Mr. Thompson," he said, voice uneven. "I deeply regret this handling." William tilted his head, watchful, waiting. "I didn't know your service, your property rights. Had I—" "You chose not to know," Elizabeth cut in, voice ablade. "You didn't ask, didn't pause, didn't think. You judged him at first sight, not as a veteran, a father, a man, but a problem." She stepped closer. The room froze. Coleman's mouth opened, then shut. Every excuse would damn him further. William's silence had been mighty, but Elizabeth's words now demanded reckoning, raw and relentless. He turned to the bailiff. Ensure Mr. Thompson's record is cleared immediately." "Yes, Your Honor," came the reply. To William, "If I can rectify—" "There's something," William interrupted. Coleman leaned in, hopeful. "Start listening," William said. "Start seeing. No sermon, no rage, just a directive, pinpointing where it all began. Not in law, but in a man's refusal to look deeper." Coleman sank back, the bench no longer his throne. His once easy power now crushed him, wielded against an undeserving soul. Outside, the storm raged. News alerts, tweets, hashtags. # William Thompson. # justice misjudged. # truth unveiled. But inside, the real shift was done. Power had flipped, and all felt it. The untouchable judge was exposed, not by force, but by a near-silent man and a daughter, who spoke when it mattered. Elizabeth took her father's hand, not for show, but for connection. William's shoulders eased, the day's weight lifting. His name was cleared, his story heard, his dignity restored. Coleman wasn't left with just an overturned case, but a harsher truth. He'd become what he'd vowed to oppose, a judge blinded by bias over law. He scanned the room, but no eyes met his. Not clerks, not lawyers, not the crowd, not William. They gazed at a man who entered alone and left a symbol, bearing history's weight, yet standing taller than the system that tried to fell him. William needed no vengeance, no fury. He needed truth, delivered in a black suit, a folder, and an unflinching voice. No one recalled the sentence, only the silence, the stillness, the man who faced power and didn't budge, because he didn't need to. Truth was his ally. The system just lagged behind. For a moment, no one stirred. No one spoke. The courtroom, once alive with judgment, now knelt in reverent silence. Not mere pause, but worship of a revelation. William Thompson, 78, stood central, unshackled, unbroken. He rose taller, not by the court's grace, but by claiming his space, his time. Coleman gripped control's fragments, but his gavel was gone. In its place, the burden of his assumptions clashed with undeniable truth. He stared at the bench, seeking lost authority. But the air had shifted. All felt it. William stepped forward, one deliberate step, each motion heavy with years and the courage of their worth. He met Coleman's gaze, not with rebellion, but clarity. Their eyes locked, one atop the bench, one freed from its shadow. William's voice, low, firm, carried a century of unspoken wrongs. "Tell me, Your Honor," he said. "Still think I trespassed?" No answer needed. It was a mirror Coleman couldn't escape. The room pulsed. Heads turned, shoulders tensed, eyes wide. It took hours, documents, a daughter's steel, and a man's unyielding will to expose this court as no bastion of justice, but a stage for presumption. William didn't beg respect. He commanded it, not with shouts, but presence. He'd entered as a number, a vagrant, a man out of place, but now held center stage, and those who'd scorned him couldn't look away. Coleman groped for words, but none came. His robe adjusted, a futile shield, as power revealed its true holder. William, titleless, but towering. The hush held. Then William spoke, slow, deliberate, with the grace of a man who knew his moment's weight. "My father built that house by hand," he said. "My mother died there. My name's etched in its frame before I could read. No paper proves my place. The land knows." Breaths caught behind him. It wasn't just ownership, but legacy, history, the claim of those told they had none. William turned to the room, not just the judge, addressing all who judged, ignored, or sidelined. "My life's been a chorus of 'move on,'" he said. "Step aside, make way." I hear it in stares, in store shadows, in rooms like this. He breathed. "Yet I stand." No shout. His presence filled every pulse in the room. Enough. Elizabeth stood silent, yielding the stage. She knew this was his, owned not by wrath, but resolve. William faced Coleman once more. "You saw me," he said. "Not as a man, but a nuisance, a case to close, a body to process. You never asked who I was. You decided I didn't count." Coleman swallowed, knowing William counted, always had, just never given the chance. Until now. William stepped back, needing no cheers, no fame. He needed truth in the light, unerasable. A reporter slipped out, headlines brewing. But William thought of quieter things, mornings by that porch, his daughter's voice when he said, "It's time." He sat, and the room stayed hushed, not from pity, but reverence. This wasn't just a defendant. It was a victor, not over the system, but by refusing its theft of his soul. That triumph can't be undone. That power needs no leave. Coleman faced the room, but only truth stared back. The room stilled, not with strain but a deeper weight, realization, remorse, reckoning. Coleman sat, hands on the bench, face ashen. His once thundering voice fell silent, not for lack of words, but their cost now clear. He looked past William, past Elizabeth, to the void between. Once his power's throne, now truth's domain, unshakable, undeniable. It hadn't just toppled a case, it toppled him. William Thompson, 78, stood tall, freed from a sentence that never should have been. No anger, no gloating, no revelry. He was done proving, explaining, being underestimated by those too proud to ask his truth. Outside, the world roared. News flashed, headlines screamed, cameras crowded the steps for something righteous. Veteran wronged. Senator's daughter shatters ruling. Court's shame exposed. Inside, the room stirred cautiously. The clerk gathered papers, eyes wide. The bailiff stepped back, seeing not a defendant but a man to honor. The prosecutor, shaken, packed files with care. Knowing justice wasn't given, it was seized, restored. William turned to Elizabeth, who nodded, proud, silent. Her presence had spoken, undone. They walked to the exit, side by side, every eye trailing, not for drama but respect. William entered as a suspect. He left as endurance incarnate, proving dignity isn't court-granted. It's carried, even when none hear. At the doors, someone opened them wordlessly. Outside, the sun blazed warmer. Reporters swarmed the steps, some shouting, some filming, some silent. William paused, surveying the crowd, then stood atop the stairs, no mic, just him and history. A reporter lunged. "Ms. Harper, a statement?" William looked down, then up, voice heavy with gravitas. "Long time I thought silence meant survival," he said. "That doing right would show the world my worth." He paused. "But the world's blind, till forced to see." He faced a camera. "I didn't come to fight," he said. "I came to sit on my porch, built by my hands, where my wife held our girl, where I learned belonging." He glanced at Elizabeth, then the crowd. "And they said I didn't." The crowd hushed. William nodded. "They tried to steal my place, my name, my past. But they didn't know I'd built something no court can touch." He tapped his chest. "Here." Another reporter called. "What's your hope from this?" William didn't haste. "That someone sees this and stops judging blind," he said. "That a robe, badge, or suit asks why before punishing." He breathed. "And that the next William Thompson doesn't need a senator daughter to be heard." The words didn't land. They resounded, rippling through cameras, screens, eyes afar. He stepped back, Elizabeth at his arm, descending slowly. Behind them lingered a story, a warning, a shift, perhaps a change. Inside, Coleman stayed rooted, silence encircling, staring at William's former place. Not his absence haunted, but his presence. Calm, clear, true. Coleman would carry it forever, not by William's demand, but its earned weight. As cameras faded, minds replayed the scene. A question lingered. How many William Thompsons are judged unknown? Will the world hear before it's too late? The room's mightiest voice often whispers. William Thompson didn't win with rage, shouts, or fists. He stood firm with dignity, patience, truth, reminding us. Worth isn't in titles or the world's ear, but in knowing yourself when none see. For those in later years, this tale roars. We've seen change, injustice's many masks, but also truth's power, backed by the bold we've raised. No system, judge, or robe can strip your legacy. Let William's story urge us. Never doubt quiet strength. Never cease standing right. Never let the world define you by its gaze. Your story, truth, life dwarfs that. If this tale stirred you, sparked something vital, like subscribe, share it with someone who needs it. Stories like this demand memory.